What is up, YouTube? Matt McKeever here, and in today's video, we're going to try and, break down for you guys, for us to try and understand what's going on in regards to Donald Trump, social media, and all the craziness that was going on with the Parler app as well. So really excited to dive into the subject matter. But before we do so, I'd love to hear from you guys. What are your thoughts on this? Have you been following along? Is this all just noise and none of it signal in your opinion? Or is this the end of free speech as we know it? I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, because I think this is actually a really big topic and a big subject matter that a lot of people don't realize the potential repercussions and unintended consequences of some of the actions that we're seeing both social media companies as well as the government play in regards to Donald Trump's banning. So I think even before we dive into what I want to discuss with you guys today, the one subject matter I want to touch upon is this idea of, do you think it's social media a utility or is it an editorial? So is it like a newspaper where it's editorializing the coverage of the information it's presenting to you? Or is it like a utility, like a phone company? And a phone company really has no responsibility for what I say on the phone or for what I say, on a voicemail or anything like that. I'd love to hear from you guys because I think this is very nuanced. I don't think a lot of people are talking about the nuances. I think a lot of people are just getting their feelings involved. And that's both sides, left, right, center, doesn't matter where you are. I think there's a lot of feelings and emotions that are hijacking people's logical thought processes because I think there are some scary precedences that are being set. And understand that it's very rare that those in power get a new toy and don't play with it more than once. In fact, when I think of this, one of the few examples is maybe nuclear weapons, right? Powerful beings got a new toy. They only played with it twice, and essentially they put it back in the box and never played with it again. But boy, did they really try and play with that toy more than once. They just didn't get the chance to do it, but it seems like there was multiple actors in the U.S. military, the Russian military, at times the Chinese military, the Korean. There's so many times that people have wanted to use it, but they just haven't been allowed. And what I'm scared of is that there's going to be less consequences to this new toy that those in power regulators have in regards to banning and stopping free speech. So what we're going to talk about today is, should social media companies have banned Trump's accounts? And really, was it their approach as well appropriate? And why did Trump get banned? We're also going to cover, is it social media's prerogative to actually moderate the content and moderate free speech? And then are there, comparables in Canada, and what are the consequences for the future? So, before, during, and after a group of Trump supporters attacked the Capitol, leaving 5 dead, a number of social media platforms decided that enough is enough, and they weren't going to allow Trump and many of his supporters to engage online anymore. And so let's just quickly cover a synopsis of which apps or what platforms or what companies banned Trump. So Reddit, banned the subreddit r/Donald Trump. Twitch disabled Trump's channel. Shopify took down 2 stores affiliated with Trump. One related to his organization and the other which sold his campaign merch. Now, Twitter permanently banned his account. YouTube beefed up censorship of false claims related to Trump winning the election. Facebook and Instagram banned Trump from posting for 2 weeks until the transition of power is complete. Snapchat disabled his account. TikTok removed content violations and redirected hashtags related to storming the Capitol. And Discord banned the server The Donald. Pinterest has been limiting hashtags like Stop the Steal since November. Thank God Pinterest got involved. And Stripe will no longer process payments for Trump's campaign, which continued to fundraise throughout the past few weeks, which seems to take things a step further, cutting off Trump's ability to make money, similar to the Shopify stores. So that leaves the interesting debacle of the app Parler. But before we even get into that, that's a really long laundry list I read off. And the one thing that I think is very interesting here is understanding that on a lot of these platforms, there's other people that regularly incite hatred or violence or other things in probably more direct routes. In fact, you can look at governments that are very hostile to other countries and even their own citizens that may make things like being gay a capital offense, right? Or banning women from driving. And yet we don't see social media companies choosing to fight those battles. They're really just focused on that. Now, the big argument that one could make here is that if you view things as Trump yelling fire in a crowded theater, that's the one time when really you don't have the right of free speech. So if he was directly inciting violence or directly inciting chaos, then there's an argument here. And that does then separate it from, say, other hostile entities that are on social media, but they're not, in the moment hostile. Like there's not an impeding threat per se. So again, nuanced topic. I'm not claiming to have all the answers, but I do want to be able to explore these conversations. I do want to explore these conversations with you guys. So let me know in the comments, what are your thoughts? And if you think we're missing the mark by a mile, I'd love to hear the logic and rationale behind your thought process as well. So, why did the Trump ban occur? They don't support the inciting of violence that Trump was instilling. That's essentially the argument that every social media platform is taking. Now, at the same time, it seems that Trump was very precise in his language and tried to walk a very fine line. And again, this is where, our social media is in charge of moderating comments and content. And then in addition, are they in charge of moderating comments and content based upon their perceived intentions rather than the actual words? Very complicated, very nuanced. This needs finesse, but I'd love to hear what are your thoughts in the comments section. And then, we went back on the Wayback Machine to try and find if there was really, a smoking gun, or if any news agencies had a smoking gun of a direct example of Trump clearly inciting violence. Because again, it doesn't seem like there is. And it doesn't seem like anyone's really pointing to it. Now, all this being said, understand, I'm still a capitalist. I'm still a libertarian. I technically think that these companies have the right to choose to ban Trump if they want to. But I think that they're walking down a very slippery slope. And in addition to that, it's just very interesting how they all moved in such vast unison in such a short period of time. So again, in a way, this kind of feels like the government has outsourced censorship to private companies that then can't necessarily be held accountable. But the government has very tight, unique workings with these major tech companies as well, right? Whether you're talking about the prison program or all the other programs where they've got backdoors and entries to these companies. And in the past, they've butted heads with these companies. It's very difficult to not think that these companies are afraid of, antitrust lawsuits and being framed as monopolies and things of that nature. So keeping whoever happens to be the power at these and at the moment, or soon to be the moment in power, just seems like a logical self-defense mechanism for these social media companies. But it is really interesting when we see them all acting in such mass unison. They're essentially dictating what the cultural norms are here, right? Let that sink in. They are dictating what the cultural norms are. Shouldn't we, the people, really be dictating what the cultural norms are? If you don't like Donald Trump, if you don't like his followers, shouldn't you just choose not to listen? Shouldn't you choose just to ignore them or counter fight their facts and arguments? The other interesting discussion here that we're not going to explore in depth, but I'd love to hear your opinions on is, do you think, is there a big difference between what happened in the Capitol and say when Antifa and other protesters were flaring up this summer? There was definitely incidences of violence there, and we didn't see the social media platforms move in to make mass sweeping moves like they did against Trump and some of his supporters. But anyways, let's move on to Parler. So if you guys aren't familiar with Parler, it's essentially a right-leaning app where a lot of Trump supporters and other right-winged individuals move towards that once they started being censored and blocked on the more mainstream media outlets. And this really didn't stop there, right? There was a lot of other companies that stopped their partnerships with Parler. And the biggest one that I want to mention is Amazon's web service Cloud Unit stopped providing Parler with cloud services. This is like the kiss of death. If you don't have your servers, if you can't host your website, if you can't handle the volume of traffic. And what's interesting is sure, they could potentially go to other providers, but that's like Google. And again, YouTube's already moderated Trump. So it seems like Trump is being positioned or Parler, in this situation is being positioned in a very, very selected set of sequences and steps that's going to result in them essentially just not being able to function and probably going broke, because they maybe could reach out to small service providers, but they're likely not going to be able to handle the volume that occurred once Trump got banned from all the social media platforms, because there was so much demand going over. And since Amazon's decision was upheld in court, and Parler wasn't able to get them to reinstate the cloud services, Parler's only been able to really provide a very watered down basic version of its services to users. So this is fascinating. Also Google and Apple banned it from the Play Store. There is so much to break down here, but what I'd rather focus on, you guys, is more the theme behind all this. So this is something we talked about briefly last night on my Monday Night Marijuana Madness live stream, where I was talking about the fracturing of the internet. I think it's really important that you guys understand that I don't think the internet's going to look the way it does today 5-10 years from now. I think that there's a very high probability that we're going to end up with a much more fractured internet where we're not going to have all the same social collective consciousness. Right now, we all use YouTube. Most of us use Facebook. A lot of us use Twitter. Most of us are on Instagram. And because of that, we all have the same memes. We all know the same viral jokes. And there's a certain, just collective consciousness there that like allows us to have points of reference and understanding with each other. And as we continue to see the internet move to more a walled garden, whether that walled garden is a platform garden, like what Joe Rogan moved to with Spotify by them essentially getting access to his content on an exclusive basis and no longer being on other platforms, or whether we're looking at more a paid wall, like what Dave Rubin's done with the website Locals, which is an interesting, counterpoint or counter movement to a lot of the banning that we saw on other social media platforms. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions on all this, but do you think, are we moving towards a more fractured internet? Will people find themselves more and more in echo chambers where they're only getting opinions from other people that are of like mind? And will we see everyone, both right and left, because of this, move to further extremes rather than a centered view, simply because they're only surrounding themselves with yes men and people that agree with their opinions? I think that this is likely going to be one of the most unfortunate consequences of these bans. Is that I think we're going to see a lot of other apps move up, a lot of walled gardens, and we're going to lose a certain touchstone that we had. And maybe that's good. Maybe that's bad. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your comments. But one thing I know that I'm stressing to my team, I'm stressing to my coaching clients, I'm stressing to the Cashflow Tribe community is if you ever wanted to be a social media influencer, if you ever had dreams of going viral, you need to get while the getting's good. I don't think this is promised forever. And I think a lot of us suffer from a recency bias where we just assume that the way things are is the way things will always be. That's not the case. The internet did not look like this 20 years ago, and there's a good chance it's not going to look like what it looks like today 20 years from now. So make the most of social media. We're sure as hell trying by doing these 2 live videos every single day. If you guys are enjoying these live videos we're bringing to you at 12:15 and 12:30 every day, please do smash that like button. If you're new to my channel, hit the subscribe button. And we'd love to hear your feedback in the comment section. So really engage, let us know your opinions. And I try to respond to every single comment that's posted, even after these videos are live. And we read out comments on every single video as well. So again, let's quickly touch upon some Canadian comparables before we wrap up this discussion. But there's really no wrapping it up. I'm literally just starting the conversation with you guys and want to hear your opinions. But again, this is important because this story, to a degree, could remind some of us Canadians about the fiasco that Jordan Peterson went through, right? With his issues with Bill C-16 and his arguments that it was compelling a certain speech. And so this was essentially attempts to, publicly censor him. And there was a lot of attacks on him, his character, his followers in that regards. And it was really interesting to see mainstream media want to hop on the emotional argument and not really look at the logic or facts or the reasoning behind Peterson's arguments. So he was worried about the precedent that the bill would set and that it could possibly lead to other infringements on our rights as Canadian citizens. And Trump's ban and the suppression of web services for Parler seems to be an unnerving precedent that people can be censored and silenced by these private corporations with really no consequences. And again, it'd be one thing if it seemed like each of these companies were acting independently, but it really feels like they're acting in unison. And I have no doubt that those of you that really don't like the CIA or the FBI or the NSA might see their shadow behind some of these actions as well. It's really interesting times, very complicated subject matters. And unfortunately, I suspect that we probably won't ever know the real truth about everything. But if we do, it'll probably be decades before it really sees the light of day. And hopefully with time, we can just shed more light on these subject matters in the moment, and we can get more truth and transparency from our public leaders and a better understanding of what the fuck is going on in our world. So these social media companies have the power to silence us or block payments to our accounts, similar to how Stripe stopped processing payments to Trump's campaign. understand that if Stripe and PayPal made a move against you, that is a tough thing to overcome as a company. Now, this is where a lot of the cryptocurrency bulls are naturally going to jump in and say that cryptocurrency could be a solution to it. And it could be to a degree, but understand that, again, coins could be tracked and traced. And we're already seeing, lists and talk of counteractions against Trump supporters occurring in the United States. And while that doesn't represent everyone on the left by any stretch of the imagination, it is again, interesting precedences that we're seeing around every corner right now in 2020 and 2021. I mean, I wonder if I'm ever not going to say things like that. But so here's the thing. Nobody's willing or able to have these tough conversations anymore. None of these companies followed through and had an open, public, productive discussion about how to salvage, what's going on in North America and particularly the United States. And without productive conversations, it's going to be hard for Canada or the United States to make any headway. If we can't interact with each other on social media, if we can't be critics of each other, if we can't have the right to free speech, that's not going to solve all these problems that you think you have. In fact, I think that it's going to cause people to go more to the extreme. They're going to see bad intentions behind every action. And to a degree, I can understand the train of logic that likely leads them there. And again, I think that what happened with Parler is a very dangerous precedent. Again, I never was on Parler. I don't even know what was being posted on Parler. But I do know essentially just a bunch of private companies getting together and deciding to ban another private company from functioning without the government enforcing it, without really any direct line of communication that blatantly stated what was wrong. It's fascinating to see how quickly this situation developed, and it'll be fascinating to see what comes next. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your opinions, and your predictions on what comes next in the comment section. So really appreciate those of you that are commenting. This seems to be a hot topic with a lot of people, so love the fact that you guys are engaging. And let's jump over to a couple of comments real quick, but want to give a shout out to everyone that's commenting, whether it's Groovies, Matthew, JB, Adil, Sam, Hungarian Experiment again, Ashley. Really appreciate everyone engaging there. Cosmic Voyager, Nate. So I'm not here to get political. I will say that free speech should absolutely be a thing, though inciting violence or doing something dangerously or criminal, then it should be, ban said platforms. Yeah. So the one thing that I will say is that when these discussions come up, I can't help but think back to a Benjamin Franklin quote, and I might butcher it here and not be 100% accurate, but the essence of the quote was, those who give up a little freedom for security deserve neither. And I think that that's something really important to keep in mind. And the logic behind this is simply that once you're willing to give up a little freedom, where's the line? And it's a slippery slope, and you're eventually going to find yourself in 1984 or a brave new world where your thoughts are controlled, your actions are controlled, your movements are controlled. Oh, no, wait, that's 2021. I forgot where we were. Awesome, guys. Well, I appreciate you guys watching today's video. Those of you smashing the like button. And as always, two-way conversation. Let me know what your thoughts are. And hoping that you guys are loving these 2 daily live videos. If you are, sharing is caring. So please share this on whatever social media platform that you're willing to, assuming you don't get banned. As well, we are considering doing sponsorships of these shows. So if you'd be interested in sponsoring a month of these shows, well, 1, that would definitely help incentivize us to want to keep them going. And 2, it would just be kind of fun for us. So in the meantime, we'll just make up a sponsor for today, and that is Steve Snails. So if you guys need snails slow, I recommend you eventually reach out to Steve at Steve Snails. Thanks, guys.